Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and I guess all New Londoners should know by now that next Tuesday, February 26th, we're going to have a special election to fill the vacancy that was left when Chris Soto took a job with the Lamont administration. And I thought it would be fun, actually, since Myrna Martinez is running a very strong Green Party campaign for the seat, to kind of take a look at the history of the Green Party in New London. We've been around for at least 18 years now, and so I invited Andy Derr, who was one of the original Thinking Green hosts back in 2004, and one of the co-founders of the New London Green Party in 2000 or 2001, and we're going to look a little bit at the history of the Green Party, the positions of the Green Party, and talk a little bit about this election, too. So welcome, Andy. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rana. Yes, I was one of the original 4 hosts in 2004. Yeah.
In fact, I was the one who kind of tagged on at the last minute, but I kind of got hooked. And I think you were a host for about 10 years.
Not that long. Maybe 5. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a long time. So we
years,
have a lot of old shows with you hosting, although unfortunately they're on VHS tape, and we can't really watch them. Well, you were part of the Green Party quite a long time before I was. I didn't join until 2004, actually, though I watched from the sidelines for a few years before that. So I don't know, would you like to talk a little bit about what it was like to be a Green Party member in New London when no one knew what the Green Party was?
I heard about the Green Party back in the early 90s, and I was down in Washington at an anti-war rally during the Desert Storm, 1991, and there was a contingent of Greens.
Wow.
And Green Party, I've heard of you guys. Where are you? And they gave me some addresses of Rhode Island and Maine where there were active Greens. And so I contacted these people, this is 1991, and they said, well, there is no Connecticut Green Party. Do you want to start one? Oh, no.
Yeah, that sounds a little daunting.
A little daunting. I was definitely daunted. But I never forgot that. And when Ralph Nader ran in '96, he spoke at Waterford High School. And I went and heard him, and I was totally flat broke that day, had not a penny to my name, but I talked them out of bumper stickers. And I went home and put a Nader LeDuc bumper sticker over my reluctant Clinton Gore bumper sticker. By '96, I was really disappointed in Clinton and was thrilled to have a Nader bumper sticker and to vote for him. And so in early '97, we started meeting people who were interested. And George Clark was part of that, and Dan Spur, and Dan Thompson.
At the time, there was a pretty strong CC Left group that had quite a few Green Party members.
Yeah. And so we were meeting, once a month and getting together, talking, and it got to be the kind of, it was like July, and I said, we are an electoral party, and so that one of the things that we have to do is we have to run some candidates. And there was like dead silence. I said, "Look, come on, guys. I know you don't want to run because I don't want to run, but we have to." And nobody was willing to take the plunge. So we've been getting 20, 25 people coming to some of our meetings, and after that they started getting 10 and 5 and. By the end of the year, it just fizzled out, and we stopped meeting. It didn't happen, I guess by November. And I was disappointed, and continued to be disappointed in Clinton and the Democrats. But there was no alternative. And in 2000, Nader ran, and here we are. Boom! It was an actual campaign, and you know, I was involved in it. There was a bunch of people in New London and Connecticut working on the campaign, and when it was over, we continued to meet and to say, hey, we'll get get a Southeast Connecticut Green Party going. But it turned out that the only people coming to the meetings were from New London. And so we said, okay, we'll be the New London Greens. And that was 2001, early January, February, we became the New London Greens. And so the first thing I said is, we are going to have a candidate in November for the municipal elections. If I have to run myself, and I don't want to run.
Last words.
Yeah, well, I knew saying it. I knew what I was saying, but I said we are going to have a candidate, and so Chris Nelson and I spent weeks going around and talking to people, and nobody wanted to run. Well, we did find somebody who was interested in running, and it's Bob Stuller.
Yeah, he had actually sent $25 to the National Green Party, perhaps a year or two prior to that.
Okay.
Was not aware that there was any Southeastern presence, had not met any of you who had been meeting.
Yeah.
And then, and I think they never cashed his check back before, back in the days when I used to do the manual check balancing. That $25 just was the error for years. They just, I don't know what happened. But yes, he tells that you and Chris Nelson knocked on our door.
One of the big issues was, of course, Fort Trumbull, and Bob had been involved in that from very early on, and we had who are the people that have issues in New London, and these are the people we're talking to, and so Bob, I'd never met Bob before, and what we want to talk to you about running for city council, and well, he agreed to do it, and I ran too. Both of us ran. And we got creamed. we expected that, but Lonnie Braxton told us, "Hey, you're not going to win the first time. Maybe you win. Not likely the second time. Maybe you'll win the third time."
It actually took longer than that.
It did take longer than that, but and that was so. Bob and I ran. It was 2001, and we did quite poorly. We weren't quite last, but there was a Republican that didn't campaign at all, and we outpolled him. And then we ran in 2003, and we did quite poorly.
But a little better.
A little better, but we were pretty close to last. And we ran in 2005. And 2005 was when One New London was running candidates, and when the Fort Trumbull issue and eminent domain was right up there on everybody's, and it was like, we know how to do this. We've been running on this issue for this 2 elections already, and we did quite well. We didn't win. I was like 110 votes from winning.
And I think on the school board side, I think Ken Hansen was less than maybe 50 votes short of winning a seat on the board.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and so we were doing a lot better. But it was, that was the last time that Bob and I ran. We'd had enough.
You did your duty.
and really, what I wanted out of this it was not my life's ambition to be on city council. It's it's an important job, and I'm glad that there are people willing to do it, and I'm glad that it doesn't have to be me, because it's not something that really turns me on. I'm not excited about being on city council. I wanted good candidates. I wanted somebody and to run. I wanted the good people that I wanted to vote for to actually have a chance to run, and I think that's what's happened. That we have elected one city councilor, and we've had 4 victories on Board of Ed, and that to me is just so wonderful, because here are the people that I wanted to vote for, running as Greens and getting elected, and you know, it's wonderful. It's great. It's
I do tell people who, you know, want to have an idea, like how do Greens like get elected, and I tell them there really aren't shortcuts. I think we've learned some things over the years that if we were starting out now, it might not have taken quite as long if we knew then what we know now.
Yeah.
But there still is not really a shortcut. You have to, your community needs to know you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that takes time.
You have to, you know, if there's a specific issue that you're in the paper, you know, like Ernie Hewitt got elected to city council because of a specific thing in his neighborhood. He was running a neighborhood group, and
right.
And that put him onto city council.
As a Democrat.
As a Democrat, oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, and that is the reality that we've learned, that if you need 1,500 votes to get on city council, there are at least 600 voters who will just vote the straight line Democratic party line without even considering who the candidates are. So we start out with maybe a 600 vote handicap.
Yes.
So we have to do better to get on than they do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And it's difficult. It's still difficult. You know, Myrna, in her last Board of Ed run, she placed 7th. She was the first time that she was not cross-endorsed by the Republicans. And so I think that was a great victory for us for a Green to be elected just as a Green. And you know,
yeah.
Here we go. Maybe we can do that again.
Maybe. Actually, you know, if you look at the ballot for the upcoming special election, because it is only one office, I don't know if we want to look at what the ballot looks like, because the candidates' names, no one is really hard to find on a ballot. Mm-hmm. You know, when you look at our ballot for City Council and Board of Ed, it's a grid, and our Green Party candidates are in really like in far right corners, and so it's hard. Point. Okay. So, so the Green Party is still towards the bottom of the ballot, but at least it is a list of names. Yeah. Whereas the City Council Board of Ed ballot is really kind of hard to find people. But yeah, I mean, Myrna actually feels very proud of getting in, even though it was by 9 votes, because every single person who voted for her had to intentionally look for her name. No one was doing it just going straight across the line and voting because your name was in that right horizontal space. So so we have gone somewhere. Well, before the show, we were talking a little bit about some of the issues. You mentioned eminent domain, and I think like locally controlled economic development, appropriately scaled for the people, not corporate welfare, has always been part of our mission. But I was looking back at shows we had in 2004. We started this show in 2004 in October. Apparently our first show was October 27th, 2004, or at least the last. I look at the subjects of these shows and candidates. Caleb Kleppner talking about ranked choice voting. And you know, right now, there is a bill that was just introduced this session, an act concerning ranked choice voting in primaries for nomination. And I think it was people, Republicans perhaps, who were really kind of frightened by Stefanowski's victory in their primary. You know, he kind of came out of the blue and had something like 28% or 29%.
Yeah.
Hardly a majority, barely a plurality.
Well, ranked choice voting, I think, is very important because we talk about majority rules. And in our elections, that's not true. We have people being elected routinely for just about everything who do not have majority of the vote. Almost every president in recent has been under 50%. That because there are so many candidates running, people have not got 50, sometimes not even 45%.
Right.
It's and you know, the state of Louisiana has their electoral law is that if nobody gets 50% of the vote, they have a runoff from the top two candidates. And what a good idea! Only ranked choice voting. You don't need to have a separate election. That you put down your first choice, the person that you really want, and then if they don't make it, who's your second choice and your third choice, and that way, if nobody wins a majority, then we redistribute votes until they get a majority, and it's such a simple idea, and it's such appalling to me. Plurality wins.
And you know, the Charter Commission that we had in New London in 2010 recommended that when New London established this strong mayoral position, that the mayor be elected only by a majority, and they did not want to write ranked choice voting into the charter because our ballots, as the state prescribes them, it's not really compatible yet. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to write in a majority, and I remember Bob Grills coming before council and saying, ultimately, we would like to see this use instant runoff voting so we don't have to spend money on a separate runoff election that never has as good turnout. And it didn't happen. But in a city that kind of gets as fractious as New London, someone who wins with 40% of the vote could actually have 60% of the city hating them.
Yeah.
You know, so at least if you have ranked choice, the person who gets in, everyone a majority somewhat approve of those people, individuals, even if they weren't their first choice. Yeah. So this was a show we did in 2004 or early 2005, 15 years later.
The state of Maine now uses ranked choice voting in their congressional elections, and the city of San Francisco's been using it for years, and I think it's a coming thing. I think people are going to realize that the plurality winner is a really bad idea. And like Bob Stefanowski, he got 28%, and then got really beat badly in the election, and one of the other Republican candidates might have done much better. But he had that core support. So
so we continue. And actually, last week's show was with Jeffrey Hart, and he is a local who has been involved in a statewide effort to promote this bill to kind of pilot ranked choice voting within the primary system, and then, if it works well, Connecticut's kind of the land of steady habits. It's always a good idea to pilot a limited study first and see how it works, to demystify it, and then see if it can be expanded. But so that was one of our shows that we did. Like
we did a drug policy. Cliff Thornton.
In 2005.
Was running for governor in 2006, and he was on the show several times in that year. And talking about issues that are now in the forefront of American policy. Mass incarceration. We were talking about that with Cliff Thornton on this show in 2005, 2006. And marijuana legalization is now being debated in Connecticut. And we were talking about that in 2005, 2006.
Yeah, and not just Cliff Thornton. I think you had Peter Christ from LEAP on your show.
That's right.
At
Law
one
enforcement
point.
Against prohibition. Yeah.
And to this day, they remain one of my favorite sources, because no one can really accuse a group that's entire, not membership. Their membership is open, but their speakers have to have been worked in law enforcement in some capacity. So it's not a bunch of like stoners or stereotypical, pro-drug people. They're actually the people who have fought the war on drugs in the front lines, and they know it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, they were on the show, this is 14 years ago. So, and there are bills in both the Connecticut Senate and House to try to tease out what legalization of recreational marijuana will look like. From what I hear, the Senate bill, which is a little vaguer, is actually much better in concept, because it's rooted more in using legalization to repair the damage done, and less about being a cash cow for people. The state and for the people who own the businesses.
Yeah.
So, yes, as we look back, we had a few shows. This actually, we've made a lot of progress. Love Makes a Family and civil unions, and fortunately in Connecticut, gay marriage is legal. It's nationwide. It's recognized. So I guess in some things, progress was made within a reasonable amount of time.
And we also had John Batista on.
Oh, that's
about
true.
Single-payer health care. And that, again, is on the agenda. We have Obamacare, which is providing health care to a lot of people, including me. That's where my wife and I get our health care. Even though I have a job, the health care plan isn't as good or as cheap. And the Green Party has always been in favor of single payer. And, so that's what some people might like to call Medicare for everyone.
Yes, and as a person who now is on Medicare,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I was thinking in the state of Connecticut, when I've talked to Myrna about this issue at a state level, we wonder. I don't think a state can have a true single payer system, because the federal policies do influence. But I think we could aim for universal coverage here. And I keep thinking we need like a Husky for all. We have, 4 or 5 different types of Husky insurance that are based in Connecticut, and they expand a lot of access to coverage. We can expand it more. Can you imagine how many businesses would want to locate here if they knew their employees would get health insurance without the company having to pay for it? So some of these issues, it's really quite. We had Laura Cordes on talking about reproductive rights, and that, it goes in and out of the news, but there are a lot of fears, at least on the national front, that reproductive rights could be threatened. So it's interesting to me, and of course, clean energy, green energy. We're seeing now, a wind farm being conceived of in our region. Some things don't change, and now these are just the shows from 2004 and 5. I'm not going any more recent than that. So it's really interesting to me that some issues really do stay the same, some get a little better, but I feel like we've been kind of ahead of the curve on some of them. I don't know. I thought maybe we want to talk a little bit about other general issues that the Green Party has, or the values. Well, peace, that's, I don't know where to get started on that, really.
We've been at war since 2001.
Yes. There's actually a generation now that has not been, that they're adults now, or becoming adults now, when they've never lived in a time when there isn't a war going on. And of course, with your age, our age, I'm a little older than you, and Bob and I were very impacted by the draft in the United States. Yeah. And so we hated the draft. Mm-hmm. It really did affect our lives. But I'll tell you, the volunteer army is maybe worse, because when there's a job shortage, it becomes, we have a certain class of people who become, our fighters, and they don't have parents who are in Congress. And so wars can be started with very little regard for the human life and the environmental damage that could be done. So I don't know what the solution is, but...
Not have wars.
Yeah, there might be some things that are worth fighting for, but it seems as though so often we've made things worse when we enter situations that we don't have much of an understanding of. So yeah, I did bring, the Green Party does have its 10 values, and I think a lot of people, when I first became aware of the Green Party, it did take me a while to actually register Green, because for practical purposes, to be a Green, we are disenfranchising ourselves from some of the political life of the city, or the state, or the country. We can't vote in primaries.
You can't vote in primaries, although I did, for Darrell, changed to Democrat to vote for Darrell.
For 90 days or whatever.
and then changed right back. But I don't feel that as a loss, because I think my experience when I was registered as a Democrat in my early days was that the candidates that I voted for didn't get nominated. That I was almost always on the losing end there. I think probably George McGovern, when I voted for him when I turned 18 and worked on his campaign.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been anybody else since then.
Well, that was really my experience. I had been kind of involved with the Green Party because Bob had been a candidate in 2001, 2003. Yeah. I think some of the meetings were at my house. But I remained a Democrat for many years because I wanted to vote in the primaries. And then 2004 was like the turning point for me, because there was a presidential primary, and I think there was a Democratic primary for congressmen from our area. And then there was also a local primary for the 39th State House District. And I think for presidential election, I voted for Dennis Kucinich. Okay, he didn't win. And I don't remember exactly who the candidates were for Congress. Oh, Sean McNally and Sullivan, I think. And so I voted for, I think, Sean McNally, but the Democrat who won lost ultimately to Rob Simmons. And then the last straw was Ernie Hewitt winning the primary against Lloyd Beachy. And I think I left the Democrats the next day thinking, my vote is wasted actually here. I mean, they talk about third-party votes being wasted, but I felt as though my votes were wasted in all those primaries. So yeah, I was few years behind you on the curve there, but
Yeah.
a similar experience. And so democracy, so the values. But a lot of people say who join the Green Party really do feel like the values are what
Yeah.
originally drew them.
Yeah.
They're, they've kind of stood the test of time, I think.
Yeah. I'll just read them.
Yes.
Here we go. Grassroots democracy, social justice and equal opportunity, ecological wisdom, nonviolence, decentralization, community-based economics and economic justice, gender equity and cooperation, respect for diversity, personal and global responsibility, future focus and sustainability.
They've
They
actually, 30 years after they were written, they actually still make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of them, things like decentralization and responsibility, are things that people don't usually think of as political values, but I think they're as valuable as the others.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, the New London, partly my experience with the New London Greens was, Bob and I lived in Israel for a few years in the 1970s, and we were members of a kibbutz, so we kind of lived this, socialist lifestyle. But the people who we met, who were the kibbutzniks there, were a lot of them back in the 70s, like European intellectuals who had decided to work, the Back to the Land movement. So, I'm sort of nostalgic for that, even though I'm very critical of Israel's politics nowadays. But the idea of having like blue-collar people doing real work that is very tangible and yet being really well-informed, really intelligent and educated, I actually feel like the New London Greens are a very similar group. We have a lot of people who, in the New London Greens, whose jobs are very tangible blue-collar jobs.
Yeah, I'm a carpenter myself.
Yeah. And it seems like we have, and yet people, they college educated and politically aware, artisans and carpenters and artists and even Bob, who writes software, doesn't consider himself like a computer scientist. It's like software engineer, choo-choo. So it's really interesting to me that we seem to have that mix here. A lot of Greens in New London having jobs that are really vital, but not really high-status jobs or high-paid jobs. But I don't know. To me, it really kind of bridged my kibbutz experience to life in the United States, which is something that I had missed for, before I moved to New London.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something about just the New London Greens. I think we're not exactly typical of all Green Party chapters everywhere. And one of the things I think that New London Greens have to our advantage is that we're so involved in other things in the community. So, I mean, when I met you, I think you were on the Historic District Commission.
Yeah.
And since then, you've done all kinds of other community stuff.
Well, you're on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I am.
Chris Nelson was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we really are a part of the community, and we're not outsiders here. We're
not that I'd exactly claim to be insiders, but we're definitely in the room.
Yeah.
In a lot of rooms. Yeah, if I think about it, like on boards and commissions, of course, we've had a few Greens in elected office, mostly Myrna. But on the Planning and Zoning Commission, we've almost always had someone. Tim Hanser was on that commission for a while as well. We've had representatives on some charter revision commissions. Bob's been on the Conservation Commission for years. I think we have a member on the Water and Water Pollution Authority now, Senior Affairs Commission, certainly the Sustainability and Solid Waste Task Force. So all these commissions that have to do with like land use and environmental stuff, we seem to still have a lot of involvement. And then there's all the involvement in other big pieces in our community, like fiddleheads. And I know you and Ellen, were extremely active in fiddleheads in its early years. And Ellen, of course, still
Ellen
is.
She's still employed there and was on the board of directors that actually got it open. So yeah, and a lot of Greens are employed there or have worked on worked as volunteers. A lot of Green and on the board.
Yeah, Danny Spur is president of the board.
On the board of directors. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I often try to emphasize not just to other groups of Greens, but to any group that wants to get a foothold in local politics that isn't just, the same old Republicans and Democrats. There are openings on a lot of boards and commissions.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. There's you can be a justice of the peace, which I think you are.
I am. And I've only performed one wedding, and it was a little bit reluctantly, but I did it. They didn't want anything fancy, and because I'm really bad at ritual stuff. Bob and our wedding was like, the two of us and our families and a couple of friends, and no big party and no white gown or any of that stuff. So, I mean, the idea that I would be a good justice of the peace for a fancy wedding is sort of humorous, but it is helpful because, of course, it's been my privilege that Myrna has asked me to swear her into office when she's been elected. As when I was elected, Ron Suresha, who was the first Green Justice of the Peace, who now lives in New Milford and has for quite a while, he swore me in. And then, of course, it's the petition signing.
The petition signing. Yeah, that's the biggest part.
But for anyone who's unaffiliated or a minor party, there's only a narrow window to become a justice of the peace, but it's really easy. 2020 is the next year people can become justices of the peace as non-Democrats, non-Republicans. Unlike the major party, you don't have to get approval from any kind of party boss. You just fill out a form at the city clerk's office. I think it's something like between August 1st and November 1st on presidential election years. And you just have to be a registered elector in town, and you have to sign a statement that you have not been a member of the Democratic or Republican Party since May 1st. And they don't ask you why. They don't. And New London, I think, is allowed to have 25 Democratic justices of the peace, 25 Republicans, and 25 any of the other groups. And I don't think there's ever been more than about 15 or so of the other groups. So you're kind of automatically in. So next year, I don't know, you might want to be a justice of the peace. Well,
could be.
You could.
Could be.
Yeah, but no, I think about, Fresh New London also had a very great green influence. The makerspace, all kinds of cooperatives, so many of the nonprofits. I mean, in its early days, Bike New London had a big green presence. I don't think it's so at this point, but I think whenever things are happening, we try to at least be there. And coming up, 2 years ago, not just the Greens, but we were part of a coalition that got city council, that asked city council to ban fracking waste in New London.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the 11th town to do so, and it was a pretty smooth process. And this year, some of the shoreline towns are looking at banning single-use plastic bags.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being used as a regional issue because we've heard from our Waterford friends that the store owners in Waterford are thinking, oh, if we ban the bags here, everyone who lives in Waterford will shop in East Lyme or in New London. It'll put our local merchants out of business. So we're thinking that we'll have to coordinate and get all of the towns
Mm-hmm.
to act together. And that is one thing that we're thinking about doing, not before the upcoming election, but maybe after it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other thing, beyond just talking about stands, I don't know, I think I wanted to talk a little bit, in addition to the values, is the money in politics issue.
Mm-hmm.
And how...
That is a really, really big issue, particularly since the Supreme Court threw the big monkey wrench in it all. The Green Party doesn't take corporate money. And the Democrats absolutely take corporate money. The Republicans absolutely take corporate money. And it's very clear to me, as I think it is to anybody who thinks about it, that corporate money has an influence on their policies. And it's criminal. It really is a crime that the Supreme Court has decided that money is speech. Money is free speech, and anybody who wants to can give whatever they want to any.
Yeah, and
it makes me really angry, and
yeah.
This is something that right from the start, the Green Party, not just the New London Greens, the whole Green movement internationally, no corporate money, and we're not in bed with anybody, and. We have an election here where 3 of the 4 candidates are taking the state money, which limits how much money can be raised.
And actually, that does help a lot.
That's a really good thing. But nationally and on the state level, it's so clear that the corporate money is just running the agenda, and I don't know how we're going to change that. That the Supreme Court is just
yeah.
The Supreme Court's not getting more liberal, and
no, actually,
and
there
so
are fears, that it could be worse.
I don't see how it's going to change. But
and on some issues, it's really obvious, like the healthcare issue, that that there is such resistance to any kind of single-payer plan that takes the profit motive
from
out
the insurance
of
companies
out of healthcare
and the drug companies.
Yeah, and a lot of people get hurt. This is probably the only first world country that people lose their houses because of medical bills.
Yep.
And I mean that for any representative of the people to vote in favor of policies that allow individuals, families, to lose their homes if they have medical debt, that is criminal.
Yep. So the only thing I can say is vote Green, because the Democrats and the Republicans are not going to change their policy about taking corporate money, because that's all of their elected people are elected on that corporate money, and so if you don't like the corporate money, don't vote for them.
And it is challenging.
It is challenging
because it takes money to get the word out, and I have to say that for this election, you can see the big Myrna sign, and having that level of money, and we had a huge petitioning effort, so we had to do a lot of work to get the money.
That's
but
right.
having a kind of a $20,000 budget for a single election campaign is a whole new world for me to be looking at. And we Greens have tended over the years to run serious campaigns, but for a municipal campaign, our budget might be $7,000 or $8,000, and to have one campaign and be able to spend, the Myrna's committee received $14,000 from the state. We had to raise $3,800 to get that money, and we are allowed to continue to get small donations until we hit that 21,000 mark that the Democrat and the Republican got.
And the Democrats and Republicans got that money almost automatically.
Yes, they did.
And Myrna's campaign had to get 2/3 of that money.
Yes, we
almost 700 signatures of registered voters.
Yes, in fact, we got almost 900 raw signatures, of which 690 were approved.
Yeah.
So we needed 660, and I'll vent a minute because the Republicans haven't even run a candidate in that race since 2014. They didn't run anyone against Chris Soto either time he ran. So they got it even though they never ran candidates, and we ran candidates those years that got between 5 and 10% of the vote. And it was Chris Soto cross-endorsed last fall, but that line, and we had to petition. And if Myrna wins and runs as an incumbent in 2020, we'll be petitioning again. But we know how to do it. We can do it.
Yeah.
But it does keep the corporate money out, and that's good.
And this I like this Connecticut law that we have, and it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it has been, and it was a big challenge, and I think it's really unfair that the small party third parties have to get these large numbers of signatures. Well, why is that? Because the law was written by Democrats and Republicans.
Yes, but luckily, we're not really excluded. So if we work 10 times as hard, we can do it, and that is great. So we have 5 minutes left. So I thought we'd spend the last 5 minutes kind of talking about this election, because where people can vote, where people can get to listen to the candidates.
So I want to say that I think that the Democrats and Republicans have screwed things up really well in Washington and in Hartford, and our only option to change that is not to reelect them, and I find that my opinions are much closer to Democratic positions, but the Democrats are still taking the corporate money. They're still serving not the people, but the corporations, and it's we need to change that. We need to change that, and so voting green, for me, is a really important thing. And the second part of that is Myrna herself. That Myrna is just an exceptional candidate.
She is.
And would be an exceptional state representative. She is so intelligent and passionate and compassionate, and she is organized and prepared. She is. How many times have we been to Board of Education meetings, and not all of the elected board members have done their preparation? That's never true of Myrna. Myrna has always done it. How many times have we been on city council meetings where the councilors have not, obviously, are asking questions that were answered in their prepared materials. And that's never true of Myrna. Myrna is always prepared, and Myrna is so forward-thinking and listens so carefully to people, and she would be just an exceptional state representative. And so I want to urge people Myrna is the best candidate running for this office, and that we're in a good situation where we have more than one good choice, but Myrna is, I think, by far and away the best of the four candidates, and will serve us best. And part of that is being a different voice, a third voice in Hartford. Not the Democrats and Republicans, who will continue to screw things up as they have been doing for decades.
Well, I tend to agree, and I just want people to know that tomorrow night there is a forum at the Science and Technology Magnet High School that is sponsored by the Day Paper and League of Women Voters, and there's another Neighborhood Alliance forum on Friday at the Senior Center. So I hope we can see you there. And we also have an event for Myrna, a meet and greet at Mikasa Restaurant on Sunday from 4 to 6. So if you want to talk to Myrna, find out about her views, I have to say the letters to the editor in favor of her campaign have so far been from Democrats. And this morning, she was on the Lee Elsey show. Now, I don't listen to the Lee Elsey show, but I was told, he said on air, that she is his favored candidate, and he is pretty conservative. Mm-hmm. So, as a result, I think that she has appealed to both sides of the political spectrum, just because she is so obsessive about doing her homework that people trust that she'll make an informed decision. Now, do we have a community calendar? Okay, so we don't have a community calendar. We have some computer glitches. So I will remind people, we only have another minute or two anyway, that Election Day is next Tuesday. The 26th. Don't forget to vote. Yes, don't forget to vote. The polls will be open at New London High School and at Harbor School from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it's really an important big election, so people should vote. Whoever gets elected will have to hit the ground running because of starting a month late. So next week, because it's Election Day and we'll be running around, we're going to show a tape. There was a Veterans for Peace concert done last Armistice Day that we just got a disc for. And then in 2 weeks, Jason Ortiz will be on the show talking about our state's plans for legalizing marijuana and for using cannabis legalization to promote a more just Connecticut, and not just to make people rich and balance the budget. So that's it. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Ronna.
It was kind of fun going through memory lane. And we'll see you all. I'll be back in 2 weeks, so we'll see you then.